Hello, my name is Gary Martin, alongside Rob Grimm, the Shakespeare of beer. Today we're going to be talking about copyright with Peter Coulson and also with Joe Naylor. Joe is the CEO of ImageRights USA, and he is our knowledge expert today for copyright, some best practices and how to approach the subject and register your images. So Joe, let's start with you. Give us a little background on ImageRights USA.
So ImageRights provides copyright enforcement and protection services. We'll register your images with the U.S. Copyright Office. We'll search the web for uses of your images online. We'll assess any claims you might have derived from these sightings that we provide to you. And if we deem a claim as pursuable, then we have a network of attorney partners throughout Europe, North America, and Australia, and we will pursue the claims on your behalf.
How did you guys get started? Why did this become an issue for you?
So back in 2007, my co-founder, Ted Van Cleve, who's a photographer, he reached out to me and said, hey, my stuff has to be online if I want to market it. And yet it's also enabling pretty rampant, widespread unauthorized use of my work. So is there something we can do to help me track this down? Because it's taken up basically all of my time looking for these uses. And so we did some research. We researched it for a couple of years, and in 2009, early 2010, we launched our first service, which was our discovery service. And basically that was to look for the uses online through search technologies and image recognition technologies. But we soon found that that wasn't really the core need of the photographers who we were working with. They were finding infringements just fine on their own. And they were bringing them to us saying, what do I do? I have no idea what to do with this thing. Or, I've tried to get money from this company that's using my image and they just blow me off, or whatever the case may be. Can you help me? And so we realized pretty quickly that ImageRights had to be much more than just image search. And so we built out this recovery service. Literally, the first case, I'm on the phone with the infringer on behalf of one of the photographers, and trying to negotiate a settlement. And we started from that very base root situation, and over the years built out processes to, and approaches to maximize the chance for a settlement, maximum settlement value, and so forth. And we were taking on claims that typically copyright attorneys wouldn't take on because they were
the dollar
value, lower
too low.
value, a few $100. Attorneys are going to cost $450 an hour, so they're not going to take. But we were coming at it from the photographer's standpoint. We wanted to find a solution for them. And so from years of kind of doing this brute force, we started automating, and now we have a pretty sophisticated system at ImageRights.com, our website. And essentially it brings together not only the web search and the recovery component, which is the pursuit of the claims, the damages on these claims, but also registration with the Copyright Office. And really it's three legs of the stool that we brought together.
And you guys have written your own software
yes,
for this.
So
were you in that business before? Why did Ted call you? What's your background?
So my background's in technology.
Okay.
So I was in Silicon Valley all through the 90s and early 2000s, and I had known Ted for many years. I've known him for 20, 25 years.
Right.
And so I had done a few companies, and
you knew how to build a background on this. Yeah,
and he thought with the technical background that I brought and his understanding of the need of who we would be working for effectively, that we could put together a pretty good service. And we think we have.
Well, yeah, first and foremost, you're saving photographers time, because time has always been the barrier for this. Time to actually search and look for your images where they've been infringed, and time to register with the Copyright Office, which is a nightmare.
Yep. As far as the search is concerned, we still have photographers that come to us. They've just found out about us. They've been tipped off for an infringement, then they go online, then they find out, oh, I can upload an image to Google image search, and then the floodgates open. And for so many, it's such an eye-opener, and they're overwhelmed. And just going through all the results and clicking through to the sites and trying to understand, get a grasp of what's going on and what you can actually do about it. So that's a big component of what we do, was we assess those sightings, those claims. And over time, we've developed the know-how and now have the technology to automatically filter out sightings that are, quote unquote, not pursuable. Like, you don't want to waste your time on sightings in China. Just, we took a long look at that. It's just not going to happen. You know,
No money
you're not
in it.
going to go get a settlement out of China. But rest of Europe, North America, Australia, and then we're starting to, Turkey, we just signed up a new attorney partner. So there are areas where you can pursue them. And so what we've done is created this filtering and ranking system for the sightings that we deliver to you. And basically it sorts them out into different categories. Social media sites, blogging platforms, photo sharing sites, and so forth. And the main folder to look at is the inbox. So basically these are all the sightings that we haven't automatically ruled out as not ideal to pursue, based on language of the site, IP address, the different things that we look at with our software. So then your mission as a photographer is to go into the inbox, and not only are these the candidates to pursue, they're ranked. So the top sightings are the most likely that, based on, what country they're in, what the laws are in that country, are they favorable to copyright holders, are they unfavorable? Have we had experience with that company before? That might move them up or down. So the whole point of the system is to deliver the sightings to you in a way that you're making the best use of your time. And so your role as a photographer would go in and see, okay, is this sighting authorized or not? If it is, click, move it to the authorized use folder. If it's not, click submit. It brings you to a page. You just provide us information about how much you would have normally charged, and is it registered with the U.S. Copyright Office or not?
That's all you need to know.
That's all you need to do. And then claim that, verify that you've checked your sales records.
That's easy.
And then you click submit,
Anybody
and
can
then
do
we
that.
have a team that assesses
I think
those claims.
a lot of photographers, especially ones that I talk to, think that, in Lightroom there's a feature to put your name under like the copyright metadata, and they think just because you created the image, it's copyrighted by me. Like, well, talk to me a little bit about that. Like, what are the things that we should be doing, and what are the things that most people are doing?
So with respect to copyright
Right.
on the registration side?
So like, I create an image, and a lot of people think, oh, it's mine, it's copyrighted
Right.
upon creation.
Yeah. So I was going to say nuance is far from a nuance, but basically, from the moment of creation, you are owner of the copyright to that image or that work. But within the context of U.S. law, there's the idea that, and the goal of the U.S. Copyright Office, and therefore the government, was to create a public record of the arts, everything that's created. And so they did some things to help incent or motivate artists to register their works with the public record. And so the big incentive here in the U.S. is that if you are registered timely, and I'll go into that in a sec, that you have the option to pursue statutory damages and have your attorney's fees paid for when you're pursuing an infringer. And that is a huge game changer in your negotiating position when you're actually pursuing that infringement claim. And so, unfortunately, most photographers don't register. It's a pretty archaic system. It's a clunky website. It's circa 1998, maybe. And then there's a lot of stuff, for lack of a better word, in the registration site process that, frankly, it's not even relevant 99.9% of the time. And yet, those photographers that actually take the initiative to actually try to register get thumped by those pages because they have no idea what they're talking about. And they're like, well, screw it. I got to go do something revenue generating for my business. And so it's unfortunate. And so when in the early days of ImageRights, I personally was doing all the registrations and got very familiar with it. I'm not an attorney, but we have a great network of attorneys. So if ever there's a question I have for a certain registration, I just call up one of my attorneys and they help me out with that. Or if it's something more technical on how you would fill out the registration, we have very good connections now with the folks, the assessors at the Copyright Office who actually examine the registration filings. And so they're very responsive whenever I have questions. And so that provides value back to our photographers because now they don't have to worry about trying to research every little thing that's being thrown at them in the application. And so over the years, we learned how to accommodate all these different scenarios that can happen when you're trying to register. And with that information and knowledge, we have now fully automated the process. And so those who are clients of ours who are registered for ImageRights, they can just upload their images to us, click on the USCO registration button. The form is 80% pre-populated because it's common information, it's your address, things like that, where you're from, your nationality and so forth. And then there's a few fields that are specific to that registration. Add the images you want to cover with that and then click submit. And then we just go, our software creates the application on the ECO website. So then we, we have a human review where we go log into the ECO site, make sure everything's good, pay, upload the images, and off we go.
It's just JPEGs that you're sending in attached with a
JPEG
form.
is the most common form, yeah. So, I mean, there's an array of file types that are supported, but JPEG is the most common.
You know, copyright law is something that is kind of a moving target, and it's changed, and probably will continue to. But I assume that now that registration is really happening, and your assets are now registered. Going forward, like in a state, those assets can still be viable 50 years from now, correct? Because like, was it 1932? Anything that was done before 1932 is in public domain. Anybody can use it in perpetuity.
Yeah, I mean, there's various triggers that put stuff into the public domain, and images that were published without the copyright mark before, I think, 1978. Basically, you put.
So that threat still exists. We can be creating images that can get triggered and pushed in.
So anything that's going out today, again, the copyright it's upon creation. There's no obligation to put your copyright mark on the image. So those requirements and kind of gotchas don't exist anymore.
Good.
Frankly, but it's important, I think. For the photography, and we're starting to see more and more, because there's been so much education about it over the past few years. All the different groups such as ASMP and ASPP and so forth have really made it a focus of theirs to really educate the photographers. And so we're seeing more of that. And then, frankly, with our photographers, and we have, I think we're over 4,500 photographers now, and the pattern we see is they come in, they're just like every other photographer, they don't register their images because it's a pain in the ass or they don't know how to do it. They'll submit some claims, they'll see how we assess them, and quite often it's, well, this would have been a really good claim for our attorney in California, except it's not registered timely. We still think we can settle it, but it's not going to be what it might have been. And so maybe we settle it for $1,500 or something like that. But then they start to realize, oh, wait a minute. And then they start to make it a priority. And so those clients that came in with virtually 100% of their images not registered, they methodically registered through our service. And so now their average settlements are multiples or order of magnitude higher than they were before, just because now they can leverage that registered timely status.
Mm-hmm.
What's the most common infringement that you guys see and deal with?
I'll answer that from the perspective of the most common excuse or defense, and it's basically, I saw it on Google Images, and so I just thought it was free. I mean, so the biggest issue out there is just misperception or misunderstanding of what's legal or not. And frankly, the misinformation that's out there online, it's unbelievable. Whenever I read an article that's about copyright, I almost always just go straight to the comments below, because I like to see what everybody's writing about. It gives you a sense of the general trend of the attitude towards copyright, and then you also see that everybody thinks they know what the hell they're talking about and they don't have a clue. And the problem is, photographers read those comments and they think, oh, well, I can do that, or I've got this argument, or I can get $150,000 just because. And then equally, on the other side, it's misinformation for the infringers. Because for every comment that says, oh, you can sue them for this and get that, there are these other comments, oh, you can use it for free and it doesn't matter because you got it from Google, or you got it from some social media platform. And so the misinformation out there is just, it's brutal. It's one of the biggest problems.
So let's say that I create an image, or Rob creates an image of a watch, and we label that in the name of the image, and we upload that to our blog. That becomes part of Google's image search. And if somebody finds that and then uses that image to, let's say, sell a watch similar to that, or that exact same watch, let's say I don't register that copyright. What am I looking at? If I find them, I catch them, they've been using it for 2 months to sell watches.
So it's funny, we have a case exactly like that right now, like exactly. So I'll approach it from that. I mean, here, there's actually 2 big issues in this case that we're doing. A photographer did an assignment shooting a watch and gave it to the client, who it was actually for, the watch wasn't the primary focus of the shoot. It was for a model. And then the client knew the people at the watch company and said, oh, I've got this great shot with your watch, and so they put it on their website. And so for this photographer, fortunately, it was within 3 months of when he delivered that work product to the client, which constituted the publication date. So that meant that it was registered timely, because he was able to register it within 3 months. So that affords him the additional leverage of being able to, once he files a complaint, he can pursue either his actual damages and profits directly attributable to that use, which is notoriously impossible to quantify. Just by the watch images on the website, how can you really determine how much of their business profits were derived from that?
Right, how many sales are actually generated?
So it's almost by default that if you don't have the option for statutory damages, that you're really just, it's a function of your actual damages, which would basically be what you would have licensed it for. But if you're registered timely, then you have the option of statutory damages, and those damages can be up to $30,000 if it's not willful, or $150,000 if it's found to be willful. But that's the max exposure. Unfortunately, a lot of photographers get locked in on that number, and they think, oh, I've registered my image, so I'm going to get 150 grand. It doesn't work that way. But so this photographer has a much better negotiating position to settle with this company because he registered timely, and he has that option, and therefore they have that exposure financially if it were to go all the way to a jury. But both parties are dealing with uncertainty. The other side is uncertain of what that, if it were to go to trial, what that jury might decide, and then what they might award. But then the photographer has uncertainty too. He may, for some reason, the jury may determine it's some goofy fair use deal, or he may prevail, but they feel that because of the way it went down, it's worth this instead of that. So there's a lot of uncertainty. But at least he has that option, and it puts more pressure on the other side, and so he's, on average, going to get a higher settlement. Whereas if he didn't have that, then you're just working with those actual damages as the exposure for the other side, and their legal costs. I mean, because it's going to cost them something to try to defend it. But on average, the settlement's going to be much lower.
What about something like Facebook, where obviously you can't search like you can on Google Images? Let's say I upload something to Facebook, and then maybe someone takes it off there and it's stolen from there.
Yeah.
How is that different than Google?
To us, it's really not. It's really how it's used once it's been taken from that platform. So if that same watch company found it on the model's Facebook page and used it for their homepage, the dynamics haven't fundamentally changed. How they got the image changed, but it doesn't somehow impact liability because the
infringement still exists. They still stole the image. So
and
this
it's
is
commercial exploitation of that image.
Infringement is so pervasive. You built an entire company based on it.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a percentage of how much photographers are being ripped off? Meaning, are 10% of our images being ripped off? Are 40% of our images being? How often is it happening to us without us even knowing?
Well, I'll put it this way. I mean, we certainly work with a lot of photographers. Our clients run the gamut. It's from Magnum Photos to Playboy to celebrity photographers to travel to food, you name it. And so, what's the...
What percentage of our images are actually being ripped off, do you think? I mean,
what
is there a
say,
ballpark?
So thank you. So we have quite a few stock photographers who make more money through ImageRights than they do through their stock agency.
Wow.
So that just shows you kind of a relative performance, if you will.
Yeah.
And there's a whole different, I can go off on a whole nother tangent on the stock agencies too, but just because of their practices.
Gotcha. So let's talk about Instagram. Peter, something happened recently with a photo of yours on Instagram. You want to share with us?
Yeah, it was a shoot I did with a model after a commercial shoot. It was just based on a series of works I do with the models when they're in certain parts of their life to try and capture the emotion of what they're feeling on that day. And I gave the model full permission to use it. You know, not commercially, but you can put it on your Facebook, whatever you like, on your Instagram or in Folio, give it to agencies to represent her modelling. And I was notified, just an email saying, hey, just found one of your images on Instagram, but it's a picture of the image at exhibition in New York. So we looked at that and just absolutely gutted to see one of my pictures sitting in a gallery in New York for sale for $90,000. Without nobody notifying me, nobody asking my permission to use it. The first sort of thing that went through my head, I did a bit of a search, and there'd already been 2 or 3 other people that had kicked up a bit of a stink, and most of the arguments that were coming back through social media networks was, oh, if it goes onto Facebook or Instagram, you've signed your copyright away. So I looked at a lot of the chitter chatter and the weekend warriors and all those lawyers that think they know all the rules, and I just put up my own post asking 3 simple questions. And number 1 of it, can a model give away my copyright? So even if Instagram did have, which they don't have, if you put a picture on there that you've signed your copyright over, somebody else can't sign your copyright over. You're the person who have to do it, and I hadn't put the picture on Instagram. That was my main question I was asking. It was amazing the feedback I got off it, and it started going viral. And then I found out more about this whole thing. Richard Prince was seeing an image he obviously liked. He was putting a comment onto that image, then taking a screenshot of that image. And the first thing I looked at was the image that I could see hanging, and I thought, that doesn't look quite right. So I quickly went to the model's Instagram account, found the image, and noticed the very first line underneath the picture had my name and her name, and that had been removed off, which looks to be a screenshot, but it's an edited screenshot. They've actually pulled off our contact details, or the recognition of the people who created that image, so made it anonymous, so nobody could actually say, hey, you knew where you got it from. I kept looking to it further and further. It just got harder and harder to deal with it. The more I looked into it, the more this free rights usage or whatever, and all these different arguments came up, reappropriating and
social relevance too.
All these things came up, and it became a minefield. But where I got more annoyed at was somebody else making very large amounts of money by depreciating my photo, because this is a screenshot of my photo blown up, I think 60 centimeters. So imagine it'd be a blurred mess.
Yeah.
It's just wrecked my image, because my image was shot on a 50 megapixel camera, razor sharp, beautifully exposed. So number 1, they've profited off my picture. There's photographers out there who go, but look at the recognition you got worldwide. Well, sorry, I didn't get recognition. We had to find it. Nobody knew it was mine except people who knew my work. So there's no recognition, and I'd prefer for people to say, hey, you're the guy who took that photo, not you're the guy who had a photo stolen.
Right.
I'd rather recognition that they liked my photo and, oh, I finally found you, not, oh, you're the guy who got ripped off by this.
Right.
And the compensation is something to talk about, because we called the gallery. They've sold all the prints that were in there, $90,000 a piece. So that's over $3 million in sales. If they take 30% as their cut, Richard Prince has made $2,260,000 off of stealing other people's images. And I'm going to say stealing because I think it's what it is. Writing his own commentary on it, doing a screen capture and putting it up. And he's getting away with it or pushing the boundaries of it. He's a smart guy. He knows the laws. He's been sued before. He's trying to see how far he can push this idea of making something socially relevant, having commentary on it, and profiting off of really somebody else's work. It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Huge.
And look, I think he's also been clever. I don't, how would he go if he'd taken a commercial, like a Budweiser picture,
Right.
which was an ad or something? Everything he's taken is, most of it's look like selfies.
Right.
So, the models, not the models, the actual people doing the selfie, they're not going to be looking at copyright because they don't even know that they're not making a living out of taking pictures of themselves and putting it on Instagram. So a lot of them go, oh wow, my face was on a gallery, and I was, for them it's this massive exposure, but it's not affecting their livelihood, which is, I take photos for a living.
Right.
It's my passion as well, but it's my art, it's what I do. And
So was that image that you took that was stolen and then sold, was that registered copyright here in the United States?
no, I was out in the States about 7-8 months ago. I was at one of the photo exhibitions here. I saw the booth at Copyright Council, took the paperwork, and when I got back to Australia, I thought, yeah, I need to look into this. I started to go in and go through registration. I just got so lost. Mm-hmm. And us photographers especially, we just get so busy.
Yeah.
And I don't have that time to try and work out legal talk, which made no sense at all to me.
Yeah.
And I thought by filling out a form wrong, it's not going to protect my work anyway.
Yeah.
And it just ended up going into too hard basket.
Right. You have a basket that says too hard?
Yeah, it's next to the rubbish bin. Once that basket's too full, it gets emptied in the rubbish bin.
Too hard.
So, Joe, where does he stand right now? What are his options?
Yeah, well, again, I'm not an attorney, but I've had very similar discussions with our attorneys on not necessarily this particular case, which has its own unique qualities to it, but the reality is that there's two types of potential claims that you would want to look at. One is clearly the copyright infringement claim, but you're gonna have certain limitations on what you can pursue, kind of like what you were talking about earlier. If it's not registered timely, then you have to look at the avenue of lost actual damages on your part, and then his profits directly attributed to this. And here it's a lot easier to define because there was a print created and sold, and there was money paid, and you can figure that out. The other path that is not mutually exclusive by any means, we quite often have these two types of claims in the complaints that our attorneys file here in the U.S., and that's what's referred to as a Section 1202 claim, which relates to the copyright management information. And so basically, it has nothing to do with whether you're registered, whether your image is registered or not. It's the action that they've taken with the image. So if you can establish that they have done one of a number of things as defined by that section, one being removing, actively removing the copyright information, like your copyright mark, or altering it in some way, that carries its own set of statutory damages, and you can actually pursue attorney's fees. And so that actually gets you back in the game, so to speak, even if your image isn't registered timely. And so you would pursue those two channels. So that's the theory. I mean, that's how you would approach it, but then you have to look at Richard Prince and his history. His whole brand, who he is, his business, his art, is appropriation or misappropriation of other artist's work. And he's been doing it for decades. And every time he's been challenged legally, he's come out in pretty good shape. And so that simply serves to embolden him. And so you know he's got, you talking about this number, you know he got the resources.
Yeah,
and so he's going to
smart.
fight it. And so, you know, attorneys are going to look at that, and it's not to say that somebody wouldn't or shouldn't, but you got to have your ducks in a row and you got to be ready for the fight, because it's going to be a big fight and it's probably going to go to trial. Whereas the vast majority of copyright claims don't go to trial, or they're settled. But when you're talking about somebody defending their business model, or it's some new cutting edge area of law, which frankly this kind of is both, those are the types of claims that end up in trial and then probably get appealed and reappealed and so forth. So, but yeah, I mean, it's a tough situation, because there's clearly, well, to me, there's clearly copyright infringement, but there's going to be others that say that clearly it's transformative and therefore it's fair use and he should be able to do it. But those are the kind of issues that will be debated and argued if this were to go forward.
So how do we register in other countries as well? Like, what's the workflow behind that?
So while some other countries have some kind of body that you can register through, the U.S. is pretty unique in what it provides with this option for statutory damages and attorney's fees as a result of having registered timely. Canada has, you can register with the CIPO, and they have some pretty minimal statutory damage exposure for the infringers, up to 20,000. But all the other countries that we operate in, there's not an option for statutory damages. So it's really tied to the actual value of the image, what you would have licensed it for. And because of that, the dynamics are very different in how you assess a claim in another country and how you would approach it and what would be viable for a law firm in those countries to take on the claim. It's very different from here.
So let's say I have, 20 to 30 to maybe even 100,000 photos that I think I want to register, that goes back to the beginning of me picking up a camera.
Yep.
Should I do that? Should all photographers start doing this? Like, what's your advice here?
As much as I beat the drum for registering, that's just not practical. We have a lot of photographers that come to us that have been shooting for decades. Going back to shooting the Rolling Stones in the 60s and things of that nature. And given the way that the restrictions on how you can register. So basically, if you've already published the work, a single registration filing can only cover up to 750 images, and they all have to have been initially published in the same calendar year. And so if you're dealing with 40 years of work, and a lot of times they don't know when they were published, I mean, it becomes unviable. So then we work with our photographers on that and come up with strategies that yield the best return on the time and money spent on registration. And so it's their most popular works, those images that have been distributed most widely or for the longest period of time. Maybe cover recent years, if that's more of the recent work was digitized and out there. And then importantly, put in a process for their workflow going forward to ensure that all the works going forward are covered. And so that's the approach we take. It's really kind of custom by photographer.
So it's done, just to kind of be clear, it's done by the year. So if I have, let's say, 5 years of photography and maybe 100 photos per year, I'm looking at 5 different registrations through you guys?
That's right.
And you guys will register that throughout the whole world, or is that another?
No, it's with the U.S. Copyright Office.
US Copyright.
That's where you're going to get the value.
Sure.
And to be clear, that only impacts you when you're pursuing a U.S.-based infringer, but it's really the U.S. where you get the most leverage out of that practice because of the statutory damages.
So it's smart for photographers in other countries to register with the U.S.?
Yeah, and in fact, easily half of the photographers that we register for are non-U.S. citizens. And of course, their images are ripped off in the U.S. just
all
as
the
well
time,
as
yeah.
anywhere else. And so we have especially a hotbed of photographers in the UK. We work with EPUC over there, and so We have quite a following in the UK and have been very active, and so do a lot of registrations for them, pursue a lot of claims here on their behalf.
What is the Epoch?
It's the editorial photographers of the UK and Ireland.
Peter, you had an interesting story about a certain band that used a certain photo. You want to go into that?
Can I mention a band?
I don't see why not.
Yeah, back, I think it was 2012 World Tour for Motley Crue. They had 3/4 of the way through their tour, came out to Australia, played in Sydney. One of the models that I work with, a fairly alternative model, was at the show with a boyfriend. The song Girls, Girls, Girls came on. She hated the song and went out for a smoke. When she came back in, her boyfriend says, "You were just up on stage." So we went to the best place in the world, which is YouTube, because everyone does live videos on concerts in YouTube.
Yeah.
So we just searched Girls, Girls, Girls Live, Motley Crue World Tour, and we just found every country. That song, I had 8 of my images, came up on the big projection screen. I handled it the wrong way. I went through a law firm in Australia, and it cost me $9,000 to get nowhere. And I was told my next step was going to cost me $20,000, and we don't know where that's going to go. And this is right when GFC was having a big hit, especially in the industry in Australia. So I was in a very tight position with my own business, so I just gave up on it. But we did our homework. We found the company that did the audio visuals for the screen. We found the guy who claimed to be the genius behind the show. We found he was on DeviantArt with an account. And we found in his folder on DeviantArt all those pictures that he'd taken off my DeviantArt page. So we could find the smoking gun. We found the guy who created it. He knew where he got it from, because he was actually following me on DeviantArt and put my pictures into his favourite file. It was just one of the things, again, that we didn't get the right advice from the right legal people in Australia. They didn't know how to fight it. And as a photographer, it's a minefield for us, and legal fees are just so enormous, and no matter what happens, you always feel that, well, the lawyers are always going to win, regardless. They're getting paid regardless which avenue they head you down, right or wrong.
Right.
And it just scares you off as...
What about just sending them an invoice? You know, I mean...
Yeah, but who do I legally send the invoice to?
Everybody. Send it to Motley Crue, send it to the production company.
So,
and in what country? So them having them play in all these different countries, have they breached in each country and I have to sue them individually for each country?
Yeah, that's crazy.
So we get a lot of photographers that first come to us and they're pissed off. They've been through a battle and they've been trying to recover on this from this company who's used their image. And we say, so you've contacted them, everything looks good as far as this being pursuable, just on what we see as the merits, and we have a partner here in this country, or whatever the case may be, but please send us all the communications you have with us. And we may be thinking that, everything's aligned here where there's, let's say in the US there's statutory damages exposure. We're looking at like maybe a $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 possible claim, and then the photographer sends over the communications, and they send an invoice for $400, and so all of a sudden it's like, while you haven't waived, it's like you haven't like waived your rights to pursue statutory damages, but it creates an anchor. So now an attorney looks at that and they're going to have to go into negotiations with this other company trying to explain why we're demanding $50,000.
Over $400.
And we might be very justified in doing so, but the other side's going to have in their heads $400. And they're like, what are you doing? The guy was trying to bill us $400, we'll pay the $400. And so any kind of communication that can occur but directly with the infringer before you have your attorney look at it or something like that can actually come back to really bite you. It can really undermine your
So don't
efforts.
do it. Know what you're doing. Be in contact with you guys first.
Yeah,
It makes a lot of sense.
And the key there on a much higher level is to have a plan. You know you're going to get infringed, but what are you going to do about it? Are you going to care? A lot of photographers don't care. If you do see something, do you really just want to send takedown notices? If not, if you're really going after damages, I'd recommend you have somebody to work with, whether it's ImageRights or your own attorney or whatnot, because they're going to look at it and say, given the facts of the case, this is what we recommend, this is the approach we recommend, this is what we think we should pursue and what we should be able to reasonably get in a negotiation. And so it may be far higher than what you might have thought, or it may be far less, but at least you have that opinion to help guide you.
Have you guys worked with ASMP or anybody, APA, to help shape the terms and conditions? Because to me, I'm sitting here listening to this thinking, a lot of what you do, I think, should be inside of the terms and conditions that we put on our invoices that go to our clients.
Yeah, so we speak to the guys all the time.
Yeah.
And just kind of trade ideas and what we're running into. We do the same just directly with our clients. Agencies that the agreements they have in place with their contributors, the license agreements they have with their clients. It's very important what's in there, especially explicitly defining the rights that your client has with those images, for example. We're working with one photographer now in California, and does a lot of architectural work on assignment, and he delivers that work to those clients. Then he sees his work infringed everywhere, and he has no relationship with the company that's infringing his work. So he goes after them only to find out, well, one of his clients gave him the photos. And so that doesn't mean they're not liable for infringement, but now you got a really sticky situation. The photographer doesn't want to blow up the relationship with his client. Client doesn't want to blow up their relationship with their partner or client.
Yeah.
And so what are you going to do? And now you got attorneys involved, so there's costs incurred. And so it just makes for a really sticky situation. Whereas if you're very clear with the wording and the language and talk about it with your client, that minimizes the chance of that happening. There's always a chance that that's going to happen anyway, because they're just going, yeah, whatever. But at least you really put it out there, and you at least scale it back.
Whenever I estimate, I'm sure you do the same thing. Once I have a thorough understanding of the job, I always ask what the usage is going to be. That's paramount. And then when I go to actually build my estimate, the first thing I do is go to my terms and conditions page and spell it out with the company exactly what it's going to be used for. And I think not enough people do that.
Not nearly enough people do it. Or if they do it very haphazardly, without much thought. Maybe they just got a template from somewhere.
Right.
And maybe that template doesn't even apply to their type of work. So it can set up some really bad situations.
Time is so hard for photographers. We really are fragmented. The more that can be automated, the better. And in some ways, I'm sitting here thinking this would be amazing to have inside of the estimating program. Like, I use Blinkbid and I love it. If ImageRights, if those capabilities to copyright were kind of incorporated in a program like that, so it's easier for us to manage. Because one of the things that I do now is I set calendar dates for when usage is up with a client, so that I can notify them and say, hey, your usage is about to run out. Are you interested in re-upping, or are you going to let the image die?
Yep.
It's actually still a lot to maintain.
Yeah.
It's tough. Being a photographer is weird because you're not a photographer that much. You're a businessman 80% of the time at least.
Right.
Which isn't why we got in the business in the first place.
That's right.
Right?
I like taking photos. That's
Yeah.
The bookwork, the paperwork, the legals.
It sucks.
On average, I get maybe 5-10 notifications by people saying, hey, this mob's using your picture. The time that takes up is just horrendous.
Yeah.
I can't, most of the time they're just takedown notices, but some of the companies make the takedown notice so hard to do.
Yeah.
They won't, just one email's not enough. They want to stretch out to 10, 15 emails.
Right.
You don't get paid for that.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of times, photographers, again, they don't have a plan. And so they think the first thing they're supposed to do is send a takedown notice through the website, and then they're blown off, and then they want to go sue them. And then you have this record of, well, you were just trying to get it to take down, so now they're just going to comply and say, okay, we did what you wanted. And again, it doesn't release them from liability, it just makes everything more difficult.
Right.
Whereas if you have your plan, and if it's important to you, whether you think a specific infringement is worth pursuing or not, let somebody else make that assessment for you. That way you're spending less time on it, for
Absolutely.
one. And then you're getting more expert advice.
And you're not speaking out both sides of your mouth, because when you tell the client, I'm going to charge you $400 for it, and then you turn around later and try to sue them for $50,000, you've shot yourself in the foot.
It becomes very difficult.
Yeah.
How does editorial infringements for online publications differ from something that was infringed for commercial purposes? Is there a difference, or is it pretty much the same thing?
Well, editorial use, there's a higher probability that there's a reasonable fair use argument. I mean, if they used a picture that was actually shot at the event that they're writing the story about, then they have a reasonably good argument for
Fair use.
And so a photographer may submit that claim to us because we found it and it's on a reputable news site. So it lands in their inbox and they say, oh, I didn't license this. And you say, look, I mean, they've got a pretty good argument here. But if it's, that news story was about, Mount St. Helens, and then they went and Google image search, the editor Google image search, more likely some intern found a picture of Mount St. Helens and happened to be yours, and they use it for that story, the fair use argument is much weaker. And so that's something that we might go after. But that still may color how we approach it and what your expectations might be for what you could actually reasonably pursue. Whereas if it was like some national or global sporting company and they use that image as part of the cornerstone backdrop of a whole product line, then that's a very different case.
Sure.
And so, especially if it's registered timely, you might be able to go in for a much, much larger type settlement.
For our audience who doesn't know, will you define fair use?
Well, it's gray. There's
Right.
kind of
That's the whole problem with all
Right.
copyright stuff.
But
It's
there's
up to interpretation.
certain was it commercially exploited versus educational or some kind of public good? How much of the image was used? Of the image used, how much of that was, what percentage of the final work was it? So that can sway it. Did it damage your market, by the fact that they used it in that way? And then the one that, of course, Richard Prince relies on is it transformative? And are they taking that and making a completely different work with, different messages and meanings and so, but even all of that, frankly, is subjective.
Right.
And so that's why it's really difficult going into a case where fair use is the core defensive argument.
Well, how is fair use defined in law or by the Copyright Office now? Like, what does it say?
Pretty much that,
All right.
what I just said. I mean, basically, these are the 4 guidelines, and then they literally rule on each of those 4 points to see how it may move the needle back or forth as to whether it's fair use or not. So it's very difficult.
This reminds me of a story that happened to a friend of mine, Mike Kelly. He is an architecture photographer, and he created this image called, I think it's Wake Turbulence. And it's an image of an airport, and it's a composite of maybe 50 airplanes taking off. And all those airplanes are basically next to each other. It's a beautiful image. I believe he uploaded that to Reddit, and it made it to the top of Reddit, front page, and it blew up and it became viral. So then once something like that happens, all the big publications, they take that and they want to basically get views off that. And basically every single publication was sharing this image, and it was pretty hot for a few weeks. And in internet time, that's a really long time for 2 weeks. So let's say I make it, I publish it that day, and it becomes viral overnight. And let's say 100 sites use it and push it to get more views for their pages. Can I then instantly register it through you guys and then go after those 100 sites? And can I sue all of them individually?
So I would certainly recommend registering the image because, as you said, you just published it. And so if you're within that 3-month period, you're going to get that option of statutory damages and attorney's fees, even though these infringements started before the registration date, but after your publication.
Sure.
So that's one aspect. But then you're going to have to go look at every one of those uses on a case-by-case basis, literally. And you're going to make a whoever's assessing those claims for you, and this is what we do, you're going to look at, well, what's the merit to any argument the user may have? Was it a story about the photo? Well, that's probably going to be a pretty good fair use argument. If you're writing an article about this really cool composite of 50 planes and you're showing the picture to provide the visual of what you're talking about, then that's a pretty strong fair use argument. But if it's just some article about an airport in Munich and they decided to use that because it's a cool picture of a bunch of planes, you're going to go after that. And that's not really fair use. That's just, hey, we want more traffic and more readership, meaning more ad revenue to us. So we went out and found this really cool picture and didn't pay them for it, for whatever our excuse is. And so, yeah, something like that you're going to want to go after. And if that occurs in the U.S., of course, you benefit by having registered, because then you're going to have that extra leverage. But you're going to look at each one. You're going to look at who the infringer is. Can you find their contact details? What country are they in? How are the laws? Are they favorable to you? Is it reasonable to try to pursue in that country? So there's different factors you'll have to look at on a case-by-case basis.
But this is something you guys would do on my behalf,
yeah.
Save me time.
That's right. That's exactly what we do. And then furthermore, and I wanted to get back to how you had that one experience pursuing, I guess it was a Motley Crue claim, and you spent all that money and you got nowhere. So one of the key or core missions of ours was to eliminate barriers that prevented photographers from pursuing infringement claims. One of the primary barriers is cost. And so ImageRights actually does two things to address that. We bear the financial risk of pursuing your claim. And so you don't go out of pocket for it.
That's huge.
To help us do that and remain in existence, we negotiate very favorable terms with our attorneys. And we're working with top firms throughout the world. Our attorney in Italy just won Copyright Attorney of the Year for Italy a couple years ago. So these are top firms. They see what we're doing. They like the cause. They want to be a part of it. They know we're going to deliver cases to them. They've already been assessed by us. And we're bringing them quality clients. And so that allows our photographers to pursue claims that they otherwise might not have been able to. It allows us to take on this portfolio of claims to finance these claims. It allows our photographers to pursue in countries they would never have been able to, even if they were well-funded, because we provide the access to those attorneys. And it allows them to pursue many, many simultaneous claims at the same time, whereas otherwise that would just bury them in administrative work if they were working directly with their attorneys, and also just the cost involved with one case of litigation is enough, but you start doing 50 or 100 simultaneously, you just can't do it. And so we built out this scale that allows us to do that for photographers.
It's a complicated issue because the world has become so digitized that image can instantly be everywhere.
Yep.
So a photographer could have 50, 60 claims on infringement on the same image all over the world. That's a massive uphill battle.
And when I first started the company, is how many photographers can we acquire? That's the big market. How many do we need? And then it was, how many images do we want to get to our system? Because that drives how many sightings and then how many claims. And then it was clear that it wasn't even that. You could have one image that goes viral. We have a photographer in Tasmania who one photo went absolutely viral. And it's a photo of red wine being poured into a glass. And every Italian restaurant, B&B, travel site, Italy tourism site, you name it, every event where there's wine, it somehow gets used. And so it's basically become an annuity for that photographer, that one image.
Oh,
and
man.
so you're right. And so that's,
I got to make one of those.
so that's basically, that's why once the photographers come in and we start working with them, if they're active, they review their sightings, they submit the claims, they're responsive when we need them to because we're working on the claim for them. very quickly they see the value, and that's how we end up with photographers that make more through us than their traditional distribution channels.
I think that's a hard thing to get in your head. Photographers, we talk about asset management all the time. We view our images as assets, but I think sometimes we're short-sighted, and I say we as the collective of photographers. I think we're short-sighted in that we view that asset as its initial offering, so whoever we're selling it to, but we don't think about it in terms of long range, like right. Basically an annuity this guy has developed off of this image going viral. I don't think we think about that enough.
And here's a very good example of a guy who, of course, hadn't registered the image with the Copyright Office. We started pursuing his claims anyway because we felt like there were some that we could even without that, but we registered his photo right away. And so then that that strengthened our position to continue to pursue those claims, and our success rate in settlement went way up for him, and the average settlement amount went way up for him because it was now registered timely when pursuing the US-based infringers.
Does it make any difference if I, going back to my original editorial, if I make something that's educational on how I made a photo, what if I put at the bottom of the explanation, this is not fair use, please do not share this. This is not for sharing purposes. Does that make any difference?
It helps counter their argument of fair use, but it's one of the various arguments that are kind of tossed into the bucket, and it pushes the negotiation back or forth. So I strongly recommend you do that. I also recommend watermarking the images, as much as photographers hate to do that. But at least it just kills one more argument where they say, well, it didn't have a watermark on it, or it didn't have a copyright notice, so I'm not infringing. Well, it did. And so it's, we can usually fight through that argument anyway, but it makes it that much easier to get through that hurdle and onto the next one.
So there is a legitimate reason why photographers should watermark their images, as much as we hate it, because it ruins it and takes away, but that will actually help.
Yeah.
Good to know. So have you guys thought about doing something with like Lightroom or Bridge to automate the system even more and make it even easier for us?
Yeah, so throughout the whole time I've been doing ImageRights, a big focus is on identifying things that can really help the photographers with all aspects of this. And one of the areas was, well, what different software apps do photographers use? And could we integrate somehow with those applications? And you had actually written an article about a year ago about how if you could integrate copyright registration with the US Copyright Office and a Lightroom, it'd just be a huge benefit to photographers, and if you can make it easier for them, then they'll start registering more. And so we definitely took that to heart. We'd already been looking at them anyway, but you essentially validated what we thought would be the case, and then the comments posted on your article and so forth. And so, but before you go sticking a plug-in into an Adobe product, you better make sure you have the back end working. And so at the time, we were still largely doing the copyright registrations manually, and but that jacked up the priority on automating it. And now that it's fully automated, now we can start to extend out that front end and say, okay, where are other places that would be a good area to start a copyright registration process? And Lightroom is the obvious one. And so if you can just have additional presets or some kind of module to where when you're importing your images and you're just putting in the copyright information and the metadata and whatever it is that you do for your images, click ImageRights 2, and then those will automatically post to your ImageRights account, be tagged for registration. And I mean, we're still working out what that actual user flow would be, but the idea is that it originates there. That way all of your work is going to get registered. It comes through us. Not only is it getting registered and you're not having to log into the ECO website and decrypt what they're trying to ask for, but it's all just done seamlessly. And because your images are now uploaded to your ImageRights account, we start searching on them immediately. And so you're covered on all fronts, and it's just one seamless deal from Lightroom. So that's the vision we have.
That would make it so easy.
And photographers need that. You need something that's not complex and bulky and time consuming, because we are pulled in so many directions. That would make a world of difference.
Yeah.
And two, more people need to know about you. I mean, this is, Peter and I were sitting here talking about this, like neither one of us have accounts with you, and we need to rectify that today.
Yeah. You know, we've been in the bunker. I mean, we've been learning and mastering this and figuring out how to do it. And now we feel like we know how to do it. And now we've, again, I use the word 20 times here today, but we've automated the model. And so now we're growing the team, we're scaling up, and we're now to the point where we're starting to do more outreach, as evidenced by my presence here today. You know, so we're ready.
That's awesome. So it's much needed. You know, there's one other thing that I personally wanted to talk about, because I've heard a lot of photographers, you know, really get angry about these issues of infringement, and rightfully so. I mean, it pisses you off and it instantly sets you off. There's so much gray area. It's not clear cut. In our minds, it's really clear cut. I was ripped off, so it should happen. It should be easily be a law that just is ironclad. I was reading an article that Nino Batista had done that I thought was kind of interesting, because he used an example of why fair use is so important. And it has everything to do with the fact that we live in a very litigious world. Sue happy, you know, everybody loves to sue. So, you know, if I took a picture of Gary doing something totally cool and put it on Facebook and it goes super viral and 17 million people see it, but there's a movie poster in the background, the company that owns the movie studio could come back and sue us because we're using their copyrighted information in our image. So there has to be gray area. There has to be interpretation, but we have to do what we can to protect ourselves.
And that's why there is fair use. I mean,
Right.
if there are legitimate cases of fair use.
Right.
And if there weren't, there really would be a oppressive weight on creativity.
Yeah.
Because
You
you'd be
couldn't get
afraid
anything
to
done.
do something for being sued. So there's absolutely arguments for fair use, but unfortunately, it's fair use is bastardized and exploited for the purposes of infringers that kind of inaccurately reach onto that to justify their actions.
So what I'm really taking away from this is that, you know, there are gray areas. There's no clear-cut answer for this, except for the fact that photographers have to have a plan in place. We need to do everything we can to protect what it is we create, because it is our living, it's our bread and butter. It has power to generate money for everybody, which is why people want to rip off your image in the first place, because it's a driver. It somehow has economic gain. So we need to do whatever we can to protect ourselves in this area that still is gray and will be changing. And Richard Prince is going to take this thing to court. He's going to push the bounds as far as he can, and he's going to do it again. He's going to test these waters, and he's going to do it again.
And your point is spot on. There's gray areas everywhere, from what's publication to what's fair use, you know. And even if the copyright law and the way it's interpreted itself is fairly cut and dried, ultimately, if it were to go to trial, you're at the behest of the jury. Mm-hmm. And who knows what they're going to rule. You just don't know, even if you think you got it in the bag, either as the infringer or as the plaintiff.
Right.
So that the gray area feeds the uncertainty, but what you can do is do everything you can to improve your chances.
Right.
And so all these things
that's
about,
the lesson here, absolutely.
like watermark in and of itself may not make or break your life, you know, but in a particular case, it may help move the needle a little more in your favor, depending on what defensive arguments are being thrown out there. So if you can do all these things, register your images, search for the use, put your watermark on it, you're just putting yourself in a better position when inevitably that infringement occurs and you need to decide how you're going to act on it.
This has been interesting. I've learned a lot myself. Yeah. I feel like there's so much good information that you've been able to bring to us, and hopefully a lot of photographers are going to see this and they're going to start to put an action plan in place.
Great.
So guys, if you've just watched this whole interview and you haven't been copywriting or registering your copyrights either through someone like ImageRights or directly with the government, you need to start doing it. We've outlined some of the practices that you need to take and start putting in place. Make sure to check out ImageRights. You guys are imagerights.com, correct?
Yep.
We'll have a link at the bottom of this video if you want to check that out now. Be on the lookout for developments from them too, for things like Lightroom plugins and other software that's out there. Thank you so much for watching. You can find out more information about us at rggedu.com. We make photography and Photoshop tutorials with people like Rob and Peter. We're going to be working with Peter this entire next 2 weeks doing black and white photography on his entire process and also post-process. So register at our website if you'd like to get an update on when this tutorial is available. And it should be later this summer. So rggedu.com. Obviously check out Peter Coulson's work, it's amazing. Peter, do you want to plug your website?
Yeah, it's peter-coulson.com.au. Yeah, I just push buttons.
Are you on Instagram as well?
Yeah, Instagram, Facebook.
You're everywhere.
Yeah, pretty much. Type my name in, you'll find it in Google.
Same thing with Rob. Check out Rob. He is rggphoto.com. Rob is the Shakespeare of beer. He's a food and beverage commercial photographer. My name is Gary Martin. Thanks again for watching, and we'll catch you next time.